Now we're going to take a look at how the Cold War intensified further during the 1950s, starting with the continuing arms race. Effectively, it goes like this: the USA arms, which is a threat to Russia, so the Soviet Union arms, which is a threat to the USA, so the USA arms, which is a threat to the Soviet Union, so the Soviet Union arms, which is a threat to the USA, so the USA arms, and continue and continue and continue. So here's how it goes. Here is how the arms race breaks down. Well, in 1945, the USA is secure. Why? Because they have the atomic bomb, the most powerful weapon in the world. The USSR, therefore, the Soviet Union, feels threatened. So what do? Well, they develop their own atomic bomb by 1949. So now they are level. So what does America need to do? They now feel threatened, so they need to develop their arms program, their nuclear program, and they do so. By 1952, they have secured nuclear superiority again, with the hydrogen bomb, which is about 1,000 times stronger than the atomic bomb developed in 1945. This means the Soviet Union now feels threatened. So what do? They develop their own hydrogen bomb by 1953. And then we get, so now America feels threatened. So what do? Well, by 1957, they develop intercontinental ballistic missiles. These fire missiles, so planes don't need to be used and everywhere is under threat. Effectively, these are surface-to-surface missiles, so you can launch them from one country into another. The Soviet Union also gets these. So at this point, the gap is gone. The gap is gone. They have neutralized each other's nuclear weapons threat. What this means is, what we've got to is a situation where having weapons becomes a nuclear deterrent, as in neither country wants to use them because it means the other country will use them against them. It is a nuclear deterrent. We have a huge stack of nuclear weapons, but we don't want to use them. They are there to prevent war, effectively. Because it would be completely mad to use them, as in mutually assured destruction. To launch a nuclear weapon would result in your own destruction as well. It would be suicidal. So neither side want to press the button to launch nuclear weapons due to the fear of retaliation. What you'll see happens here then over a few lessons is they're going to try and push each other as far as they can. This is called brinksmanship. Both countries seeing what they can get away with, trying to make life difficult for the other country as much as possible and make life uncomfortable for the other country without going all the way into nuclear war. In addition to that, during the 1950s, you've got new leaders taking over each country. In America, you've got Eisenhower, who takes over in January of 1953. He is strongly anti-communist and is determined to block growth, stop communist expansion. However, he is wary of the strength of nuclear weapons. He's cautious around nuclear weapons, and he is open to talks with the Soviet Union to try to improve relations. So he's anti-communist, but he's fearful of the threat that nuclear weapons pose, and therefore he's willing to negotiate with the Soviet Union to try and improve the relationship between the countries. In the Soviet Union, Stalin is now dead, so Khrushchev takes over in 1956 following a power struggle after Stalin's death. It's still communist leadership, and Khrushchev actually, to begin with, criticizes Stalin's leadership for being too brutal, too aggressive and murderous and all these things. And Khrushchev is willing to have a peaceful coexistence with the West. We'll see how this works out, but that's what he says when he takes over. What we get to then in the 50s, the first sort of crisis of the 50s, is the Hungarian uprising of 1956. Now, this is a very similar story that we'll see time and time again in the course, but effectively, disillusioned and frustrated Hungarians, remembering Hungary as a Soviet satellite state, disillusioned Hungarians protested about their lack of political freedoms. This led to Red Army interference. Khrushchev, therefore, installed Imre Nagy, spelt Imre Nagy, as Prime Minister of Hungary. Nagy did not believe in dictatorial communism, so he's going to introduce, or try to introduce, some reforms to Czechoslovakia to try to make life better for the Czechoslovakian people. However, Khrushchev won't like them. So effectively, Nagy has been brought in to try and stop unrest in Hungary and re-establish control. So Naj introduces some reforms, liberal reforms. He's going to reorganize the government to include non-communists. So if you're non-communist, doesn't matter, you can still be a part of the government in Czechoslovakia. He's going to release political prisoners and allow freedom of speech in Czechoslovakia. Oh dear. He persuades Khrushchev to withdraw the troops that had previously been there. And Khrushchev agreed at the time, remembering these troops who'd been put in to squash the unrest to begin with. Naj manages to persuade Khrushchev to withdraw the troops. Khrushchev says, yes, okay, that's no problem, because he's trying to calm the Hungarians down. He wants to calm the revolt. However, Naj then goes too far. On the 1st of November, Naj announced Hungary's intention to leave the Warsaw Pact. He says, we're going to leave this military alliance with the rest of the Soviet nations. Now, Khrushchev cannot allow this to happen, because if he allows Hungary to leave, it means that what about the rest of the countries? Are they all just going to leave? He cannot allow Hungary to leave the Warsaw Pact, which leads to Khrushchev's merciless reaction. Khrushchev cannot allow Hungary to leave the Warsaw Pact. This is a big threat, as it could inspire other countries to leave. So, on the 4th of November, Khrushchev orders a full Soviet invasion of Hungary involving 1,000 tanks. Naj's supporters resisted, but approximately 2,000 Hungarians were killed, and a new pro-communist government was set up. So effectively, the Khrushchev says, well, the puppet that we put in before of Naj didn't work out, so we're going to get him out and we'll put a new puppet in his place. Khrushchev had felt that the Soviet security was threatened. Naj was sentenced to death and executed as an example to other Soviet leaders. So what we see here is Naj and Hungary trying to sort of shrug off some of the Soviet influence and Khrushchev's influence, and they are mercilessly crushed because of it, strengthening Soviet control over Hungary and sending a message to the satellite states: you do not leave the Warsaw Pact, and if you try, we will stop you. So what does this prompt? What's the reaction to this worldwide? Well, the US reaction and international opinion was it was thought that the US would support the Hungarian rebels, or the people revolting in Hungary, because they had used propaganda in a US radio station called Radio Free Europe, encouraging the people of Hungary to revolt in the first place. However, when Khrushchev comes and crushes them, America does nothing. Why? Well, because the policy at the time was containment. Hungary is already a communist country, it's already a satellite state, it's already part of the buffer zone. So America says, well, we can't intervene. Our policy is to contain communism where it is, just stop it spreading to other countries. So as you are already communist, Hungary rather, is just left on their own. Any interference could have risked mutually assured destruction in nuclear war. Instead, the US simply choose to condemn the actions of the Soviet Union. They say, how dare you do that? That was very naughty. Effectively, they've done nothing effective, haven't they? Consequences of this, therefore, then, is that the Warsaw Pact was strengthened. It's a clear message from Khrushchev: you do not leave. Khrushchev's role becomes even more powerful, and the USA was seen as a letdown. They had encouraged communist countries to rebel, but when they did not help. They basically told the Hungarians to rebel and then abandoned them when they did so. The USA strongly objected to the invasion, but took no direct action.